In 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And welcome everyone to this episode of the Real Leaders Podcast. All right, and welcome everyone to the Real Leaders Podcast. Before we dive into this show today with Shelly McNamara, I just want to make sure you all are aware of what you are watching this interview on. This is Crowdcast. This is our new live streaming platform, and we do all of our interviews on here. So if you want to join, if you're watching this on LinkedIn, please join RSVP, and you'll be notified when we go live with future interviews. Next week, we're having on Seth Goldman, the founder of Honest Tea, and his current endeavor, Eat the Change. So if you want to get into that interview, please, by all means, come on over to Crowdcast, and you'll be notified when we go live with more future episodes. Shelly McNamara is our guest today. And Shelly, before we begin the live interview, anything you want to say about where people can find more information about you and your book?
Sure, Kevin. It's great to be here today. They can go to Shelly at ShellyMcNamara.com. So ShellyMcNamara.com is my website. Has all kinds of information about my new book, No Blanks, No Pauses, and also some feature writing that I've done.
Wonderful. Well, I can't wait to dive in this interview today, Shelly. And folks, if you have to leave early, this episode will later be published to our platforms on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you listen to an episode. This episode will be on there. So there should be a link that flew in earlier. Just click that link, subscribe to the podcast, leave us a review, and you will be notified when this episode is released with Shelly. It should be released, Shelly, on Saturday, not this Saturday, the following Saturday. So it will be on there. But let's get this show on the road. Here we go, folks. In 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And welcome, everyone, to this episode of the Real Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Edwards. Joining us today is Shelly McNamara, the Chief Equality and Inclusion Officer at Proctor Gamble, and also author of the book, No Blanks, No Pauses, A Path to Loving Self and Others. Shelly, thanks for being with us today.
Sure, Kevin. It's great to be here.
Great to have you on. Always great to have someone on from Cincinnati, Ohio. Is that where you're coming in from today?
I am coming in from Cincinnati. Do you have a connection here, Kevin?
I've got a connection there. CINNATI. I know Cincinnati well because that's where my family is from, and I know how to spell it because I used to always write my grandparents' letters when I was younger.
That's very good. It reminds me of, I have 14 brothers and sisters, so I'm one of 15, and I used to rattle off all the names in quick and rapid order to entertain people. But it sounds like you might have spelled Cincinnati quick and fast and got attention that way.
I learned pretty quick after I spelled it wrong the first time. Let's just say that. So yes, you do have a big family. You grew up in a big Catholic family. Where did you grow up?
Yeah, I grew up on the west side of Cleveland. First suburb west of Cleveland is Lakewood, Ohio. And so I grew up on Grace Avenue in Lakewood, Ohio.
Okay. Well, my family right now is in Madeira, and I believe somewhere in Hamilton County, my uncle is floating around there. And I got to ask you too, are you a Reds fan? Are you an Indians fan? Do you follow sports? What type of interest do you have?
Oh my goodness. Well, I don't think you'll be surprised to know that I love to write. That's one of the things that I love to do. I love to read. I love to write. I also have 3 daughters. So we have 3 daughters. So really to, follow some of the really cool things that they do. Right.
Now, how are they dealing with COVID right now? I mean, are they in school? Are they out of school?
So my wife and partner, Cindy, and I have 3 daughters. So our oldest is 23, and then we have twins that will be 21 in a couple of weeks, Kevin. And they keep reminding us that, yes, there is COVID, and they're being really safe and really respectful at school. And they're going to find a way to have a drink on their 21st birthday. And so what I could say about, so that's sort of the state of our girls. They're all at college. So 3 daughters at college. And, they're staying safe, and they are also finding a way to study and stay in school online.
I love it. If there's a will, there's a way. Well, I hope they get their drink on their 21st. It's a special day. Well, Shelly, I just wanted to know a little bit about you there, and Cincinnati is just such a special place. I grew up going there all the time, and for summers and Christmases and things like that.
I'm sorry, I'm not a Reds fan. I did grow up in Cleveland, so I will tell you, I went to the University of Michigan, and so I know I'm standing in Ohio, and it's a little dangerous to say, but I am a Michigan Wolverines fan. So I actually the only and it's not a great time for this, but the only football team that I follow is Michigan. And then, of course, I'm somewhat of a Browns fan and somewhat of a Cleveland Indians fan, but I think I'm not attentive enough to get the the high marks as a fan. I've been to a few Reds games. I enjoy going to the stadium, and it's fun. But it's not the top of my list, but I enjoy it when I go.
Well, I should be very transparent with you, let you know I am the Ohio State Buckeye fan. My father went to the Ohio State University, but as long as he likes Skyline Chili over Gold Star, I think we can get along here today.
I like Skyline. And Ann Arbor is a cool town, Kevin. If you have never been there, it's a cool town. Columbus is really awesome too.
Yeah, my dad always told me to go at least apply to Ann Arbor over Ohio State because it's a way better school. He said all he had to do to get into Ohio State back in the day was just go. And if the mirror fogged up, then he can get in.
That's not true today.
Yeah, I heard it's a better school today, but
it's a great school. We had all three of our girls applied there. They made different choices, but they all three applied. It's
good
great
to hear.
Yeah.
Great to hear. Well, Procter Gamble is such a big staple in the community in Cincinnati, and just looking at your resume, you've been with Procter and Gamble, for a long time. Like, what's kept you there? What do you like about the company?
Yeah, P&G is, first of all, it's a huge company, right? So we have almost 100,000 employees. We operate in more than 70 countries around the world. So one of the things that's really cool is that it's a global company, and so I've had the opportunity to do so many different roles in the 33 years or so that I've been here, and so I keep growing and learning. And the other thing is the people. I got to be frank with you. We have some really cool people and some really smart people who care about improving the lives of the world's consumers. And I know that sounds really catchy and really phrasey, but it's true. I mean, at the core, our purpose statement is to improve the lives of the world's consumers. And we make really cool products like Tide and Charmin and Olay and Pantene. And so we make really cool products, really cool people. And then I've just had the opportunity. I mean, for me, my career has been about learning and making a difference, right? And if I am learning and I'm also making a difference and making an impact, and frankly, right now I'm in like my dream job. So for a little less than 2 years, I've been in the role of a lifetime in my dream job as the Chief of Quality and Inclusion Officer. So that's why I've been there so long.
Well, tell us a little bit more about your new role as the Chief of Quality and Inclusion Officer. Like, what does that mean to you? And do you find maybe more purpose in that role as well? Yeah.
You said the word purpose, right? And I started the conversation by saying, P&G, our purpose is to improve the lives of the world's consumers. But one of the things that's true about that is it makes it really important for us to drive three things: to ensure that we strive to be innovative, diverse, and inclusive. Okay, and those things sound like they're independent or individual because they're three different words. They actually work together in harmony and in partnership, right? Because being innovative, creating new products, coming up with new solutions, improving the lives of the world's consumers, that innovation takes a lot of different minds, right? A lot of different ways to look at problems, a lot of different ways to look at possibilities. And so bringing in a diverse mix of employees is really incredibly, incredibly important. Then the inclusive part of that, so we are committed to be innovative. We are committed to bring together a diverse group of employees, and we are committed to be inclusive. We have to work on all three of those because it's really together that enables us to innovate at the pace and the level at which we innovate. So what does the Chief of Quality and Inclusion Officer do? On any given day, it's many different things, right, Kevin? It's really many different things. But we actually have an aspiration. So we have said we aspire to create a company and a world where both equality and inclusion are actually achievable for all. And at the cornerstone of that is respect and inclusion for all. So my job is to work on the systems, the culture, the leadership capability to enable that. So I'm going to break this down for you in a real straightforward way.
Yeah, absolutely.
First is employees. We want to make sure that in our employee base, we reflect the consumers we're making products for, right? Makes sense, right? You have a very homogeneous group of people trying to create products and market and serve and sell those products. You need to make sure that you represent that consumer base in a way, right? So, we do work on what we call, so in the employee side of that, we want to make sure we reflect the consumers we serve. And then we need to create an environment where we bring people together. They feel valued, supported, and they can unleash their gifts, right, to grow our business. So that one's really, really straightforward. The other one I mentioned to you that's important for us is brands. So we do work in the brand space. Now I work in partnership, of course, with P&G leaders around the world, and our chief brand officer leads a lot of this work, right? But we focus very much on ensuring that when we market our brands, we make sure that we bring visibility and authenticity to human beings, to humanity. So when you'll see us, you'll see a P&G ad. We want to make sure that in our advertising, in our marketing, and in our media, we're actually reflecting the consumers that we serve, but in an authentic way and in a real way, right? In a way that's accurate, and accurately reflects who they are. And then last thing I'd say is we work very intently as well in the space of what we call partnerships and community. We do believe at our core that an equal world is a better world, one where all human beings have the opportunity to grow, develop, contribute, and become their best is good. It's good for communities, countries. It's good for businesses to grow as well. So we work in partnership with a range of people who have that same value and same belief to bring about more equality and respect, in the world.
Shelly, it's amazing. It's always great to hear, kind of what the minds of leaders of big corporations that touch so many lives, like you said, consumers, so many consumers and products that Procter Gamble makes. Just great to kind of hear what's inside the minds of these leaders and kind of what they're thinking about. Now, equality and inclusion. How has it evolved since you've been at the company? Is there more of an emphasis on it now? And maybe explain about some of the forces that have increased, the awareness of making sure that you're including all of your consumers into your branding and marketing. Yeah,
you said the word force, Kevin. I think that's a great word because the world that we live in today is very different than the world when I started with P&G in the 80s. Today, consumers are demanding, right, a couple of things. They're demanding that that companies and corporations have a point of view on a number of things, and also involvement in things like, the environment and making sure that we're doing all the things that we need to do to make sure that our planet, the planet we exist on, is here for the long haul. And consumers are expecting that, and the talent that we bring in is expecting that. They're also expecting us to ensure that we have a point of view as it relates to human beings and some of the social constructs that we're in. And at the core of it, and I will tell you, the younger generation is pushing us faster than anyone. At the core of it, there's an expectation when we go to college campuses that we are diverse when we show up, that there's a range of humanity that shows up to recruit. And when that talent shows up in our offices, that talent is expecting. Because the younger generation, I just call it like 30 and under, right? It knows really clearly that that's what makes the environment a more fun, more engaging environment to be a part of. And that those are the kind of companies that are producing and creating really cool and great things that will sustain. So it is a different world. I will also say that we take the responsibility. I mean, we are a consumer goods company, so we take the responsibility of building brands really seriously. And we want to build brands that consumers trust. Okay, think about that, trust, right? And trust is a feeling, right? If I trust you, it's a feeling. And so the way in which we represent our brands and the way in which we market those brands matters a lot. So for example, portraying in our Pampers advertising, right? Portraying men as parents in addition to women is a good thing because males are parents, right? And back in the day, certainly when I was hired with P&G, that was not the kind of media that you were seeing. But it's an involvement, it's an acknowledgement that says, wait a minute, men deserve to experience their full humanity as well. And being a parent is part of that. The other thing that we do is, we avoid and ensure that we don't represent human beings in stereotypical ways or in diminutive ways. And marketing and advertising is very guilty of that in total over the many, many, many years. So these are the kinds of things that are really important for us, both who are we bringing in, what's the environment, but also the brands and how we market those, because trust is at the core of our business model, right? We need to build brands that consumers like you, Kevin, trust. And authenticity and accuracy, an accurate portrayal of human beings is one of the ways that we build trust with you, one of our consumers. And I know you have to buy P&G products because you have family in Cincinnati.
That's right. Of course. It's strictly P&G products. Now, this makes a lot of sense. Now, including more people and including the whole, representing more people, I would assume you're going to have more sales. What is the correlation between including more diversity in your branding and marketing representation?
Well, here's what I can say is the research is actually pretty unequivocal. And I can't cite to you the specific studies. But I will tell you that the research is pretty unequivocal, which is that the more diverse you are able to make a group of people, the better they are able to solve problems faster and better. So there's that. Then I'm just going to say to you that over my 30 plus years of working, I just tell you the times and the moments where I've had the opportunity to do really cool stuff is when I'm in a room with people who are working towards solving a problem or creating something really cool. And we bring different perspective, different lenses, different beliefs about what's possible, about what's true, and different skill sets. And I think, again, you ask, gee, isn't this a different company or world than when I started, in the 80s? Yes. And we've learned a lot in those decades. And it's not just about the technical differences that people bring into that conversation, but it's who they are and how they've experienced the world. And therefore, what do they see or notice, right? What do they see or notice about that, that product or that problem? And that's what's really cool. So I could just say that my experience has proven that out for me as well.
And that seems to be the main thing when we have D&I people on the show is we just bring different perspectives to the table, and it helps us think better, whether it's negotiation or coming up with a product or a branding message. It's nice to have different people with different backgrounds and perspectives. Now, how do you do that during the talent and acquisition process? Like, does Procter & Gamble have a stance on inclusion? And because I want to give you a quote. One of my favorite quotes is from Abraham Lincoln. It's like, I don't like that guy, but I must get to know him. So, you really don't know someone, or you can't make an opinion about someone until you really get to know where they come from. So do you guys have a strategy or a mindset during your talent and acquisition process or hiring process?
Yeah. So, I mean, as it relates, again, my job is the Chief Equality and Inclusion Officer, right? And so what I would tell you, one of the things that we work on is representation. We translate that into actions. It's not just an intent. When I say we want to have our diverse mix, we actually put effort against that and discipline. So we have been very public about the fact that we aspire to have 50% equal gender representation at every level of management in the company. And today we're at about 48%, close. And that took intentionality. It didn't look like that 5 years ago, Kevin. When we've had different generations of work. I've been working very intently on some work that we've been doing the last 5 years. We have also said, and why is that? Well, guess what? Women represent 50 to 51% of MBA grads today. And that's been true for a while. But we had to intervene in that and do some things to ensure that happened, because it wouldn't just happen automatically. But back to your question on sourcing, that's one of the things that we've done. We are driven by, we know we want to better reflect our consumers, and that means about 50% equal gender representation. The other thing, when you look at the U.S. population, I'll just talk about U.S., not on the global front, but U.S., the multicultural representation in the U.S. is about 40%. And so we also look to better reflect and mirror that as well. It's not an exact science, but we do set intentionality, and we set activities and measures so that we make progress against that. We're also now reporting that on our site. So if you go to the P&G Equality and Inclusion site, you'll do that. Now, your question also is about how do we operationalize that? Well, we show up on campus with a range of people that come to college campuses that are also a range of different types of backgrounds, some finance people, some marketing people, some sales, but also look different and have different backgrounds. Because people, when we have talent that comes to P&G, one of the first things that they will say to us before the interview process, what they're looking for is they want to make sure they can see themselves at the company, right? Not only see themselves at the company, but also see themselves a few levels up in the company. They want to be reflected. While we want to reflect our consumer base in the talent pool, when we go to recruit talent, that talent is looking for themselves reflected in our talent base as well.
It's very important to have people in positions of power that you can see themselves. Like I hear that from female leaders all the time on the show. It's like, gosh, we need more equal representation because, when I was growing up, it was always white males that were in those positions of power, and it was very demeaning. And, I couldn't really see myself until so-and-so came into position, and that really inspired me. Now, how do you get past what's referred to as a cognitive bias within your hiring process? Do you train people on that? And I'm just asking because I want to know about the model that you all use so others can replicate this.
Sure. And I can't speak to the exact science. I have colleagues who can speak to the exact science. Okay. But what I can tell you is we do have an approach that we use to interviewing. So we have, matter of fact, we've rolled out in the last year and a half, a new way that we do that. So there are tests that if people want to apply to P&G, they're able to do that online. Anyone can apply. We also supplement that with recruiting on campuses. And we do some experienced hiring as well. But we've been historically a develop from within company. Right. That started as only a hire from within. Okay, but now we also, over the last certainly 4 to 6 years, we do more experienced hires. So everybody takes tests online, and there's certainly the test that tests for intellectual capacity, but there's also tests that ensure that there's not cultural bias in there, right, or socialization bias, right? And I don't know how that happens, but I trust, we have a whole bunch of social scientists right. and, organizational psychologists that we have at P&G that work to do that, because we want to have a set of questions that not only get at intellectual, abilities, but also cultural fit. And when I say cultural fit, I mean more values, like what people have, what they value and what they believe, and ensure that there's that. But you also want to do that in a way that you're not, eliminating whole groups of people, right, based on their backgrounds, right, or based on their culture. And it is science. I mean, it's not, it doesn't happen by chance. There is science behind that and methodology. Now, of course, we also, once people make it through a certain step, right, the online testing, there's interviews. Right. And they're exposed to a range of different people that have the opportunity to interview them and get to know them. And really what we look for are examples where people have demonstrated the kinds of impact that they would have to make at a company like P&G.
P&G's been around for so long. I mean, they seem to be great with listening to their employees, listening to their customers, maybe a part of their secret sauce, which has made them such a successful company. From the leadership perspective, how much of an emphasis do you have on your people within your organizations? Maybe explain to business leaders listening to this why you see such benefit in diversity, inclusion, and equality.
Well, as it relates to leadership in particular, right? It's, one of the core jobs of leadership, Kevin, is to get the best out of all of those around you, right? And so one of the things that we do is, first of all, we make it really clear with all of our leadership. We have very clear expectations. We hold our leaders accountable for some specific things, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. And we consistently invest in capability. So expectations, accountability, and capability. And we have expectations on the business side, right? Those things that we all know that you learn in business school, right? Volume, profit share, or if you're the scientist, it's evidence-based, whatever. So there's that. And there's also on the development of their organization and the people that work for them and with them, but particularly the people that work for them, there is a responsibility. And one of the things is that people feel respected and they feel included in the work. Like, just take those two words, respect and included, right? And those are a couple of the base expectations of leaders. And third is that people feel supported. And there's an environment where they feel like they can contribute at their best. So all of that doesn't happen by chance. It happens because we do a series of things that help our leadership, right? A series of learning experiences that they go through. We have an annual survey that gives feedback for those leaders so they know, right? How are all of my employees? Not a few, not just a pocket, but how are all of my employees feeling about my ability to lead in a way that they get that they feel like they can be at their best every day. And if they're and from that survey, they learn those things that are getting in the way of them being at their best. So it's not a secret formula, but there is a consistency of clear expectations, clear accountability for certain specifics, and then a level of capability building. And creating a diverse organization and growing your business are two of those. And one of the things that our CEO, has said publicly is, he's worked very hard as his predecessors did, but in working to better reflect our consumer base and our employee base. And one of the things that he says publicly is he believes the work that we've done is one of the the big enablers to the company's growth. It's what's supported and enabled our success, and I believe that as well.
Now, Shelly, you've been at the company for you said since the 80s. So did you run into any obstacles during your hiring process? And what is the purpose for writing this book?
I didn't run into any problems. I will tell you, I got a funny question when I was interviewed. When I was at the University of Michigan, I put myself through school. So I worked a lot and went to school. I'm the youngest of 15 kids, Kevin, and I had a single mother. So there wasn't a lot of extra cash around. So I had to do that. Right. And I remember my interview with P&G, one of the things that they asked me about was I was an official for the intramural sports. So I actually would, imagine that as a bunch of fraternity guys out there. And I was one of the officials, and I'm only 5'1". And so I actually had one of my interviewers at P&G, just ask me if I had ever getting on that court with those guys, had I ever, I know what he said. He said, you're awfully short. This is something you'd never ask today. He's like, you're awfully short. Has your height ever been a major disadvantage to you? So that's when I reminded him from my resume that I actually officiated as an official, guys who were 6'3" and 4" that were playing intramural basketball. And then I was thinking to myself, I don't think that was a very appropriate question. Despite being 5'1", I still got hired, and that was back in the 80s. But you talk about roadblocks, and you asked, sort of in partner with that, my book. I wrote this book. It's called No Blanks, No Pauses. And it's a memoir and it's poetry as well. And before you go running away by hearing poetry, I want to explain a little bit about it. Because this is a leaders broadcast, and with the word poetry and leaders, there might be people wonder what? What I write about really is it's a book that shares insights about humanity. Okay. It's a really big word. But I write about love, about loss, about regret, and I write about the experience of being treated as less than. And I have a wife, and Cindy and I have been together for more than 35 years. We were able to get married in 2014, and we have 3 daughters who are in their 20s. So that journey and that experience of being in the LGBTQ community, being in corporate America at the same time, that was a journey to go through. And so I capture both some of my personal challenges as well as some of what I experienced, right, that are reflected in that book. I also reflect, but it's a book that's for all people. I just use sort of my backdrop of my life and my experiences to communicate some universal lessons, right? And this is a message for leadership, right? I think our job as leaders is to ensure that no one is treated as less than and has the experience of that. And when you have that feeling, Kevin, have you ever been in a situation where you felt like you were being treated as less than in some way?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. It's totally disempowering. And so I share my journey with the hopes that my journey will help others along their journey. And I write stories where I had, rejection, where I had family members that died suddenly, and what was that grief process like. So that's really in general what the book's about. But I want to tell you about the title. The title of the book is called No Blanks, No Pauses. And what it reflects is a moment in time back in 2005 when Cindy's mother introduced me to a neighbor, and she said, "This is my daughter-in-law, Shelly." Now, why was that important, and what's the relevance to leadership, right? Here's why it was important. Because back in 2005, Cindy and I couldn't be married. It wasn't legal. So we weren't married. And she was reflecting the relationship she saw and what she saw with us and with our children. And that's something, that experience of blanks and pauses is something that people who are marginalized in any way know that feeling well. They know what that feeling is when someone pauses and looks at you. Certainly people who are gay or lesbian know that feeling of you're being introduced and you're being introduced with your partner and people like don't know how to introduce you. So there's a blank and a pause. And over time, that blank and pause erodes self-confidence and it erodes that feeling of belonging and inclusion. So what I write, so the title of the book is No Blanks, No Pauses. And it's my wish for everyone. And I know it's the experience that many of us have. And I think it's the work of leadership to ensure that no one that's in your remit is made to feel less than. And those things happen in subtle ways, right? The language that's used, what you talk about in the work group, as the leader, who you spend time with and who you give the work to, who you invest in coaching and who you don't. So there's a lot of ways that leaders can communicate to someone that they are somehow less than. I want to bring out one more leadership insight from the book. There's many, but the other one is, one of the things I talk about is that, we have all, if you are human, you're biased. We just are. And all bias means that we have these beliefs that are somewhere in our brain and they're unconscious stuff. We don't even know them. They're not even aware of us. Like, I go brush my teeth and I don't overtly say, oh, Shelly, you have to get the toothpaste and put it on there. And then you have to pick up you just do it. Right. And so one of the things that I bring out in my book also is that, and I talk about is that we've all absorbed messages in us and they affect how we interact in the world. And in those messages we've absorbed, there are beliefs and there are biases. And sometimes those serve us well, and sometimes they're getting in our way of growing ourselves and of growing, right? So it's I think one of the other things is, leaders have to really, I think, check their own biases and their own beliefs. Leaders have to pay attention to what are those things underneath that are driving the decisions they make about people. And intervene, what I call intervene in the automatic, because our default, Kevin, is to people who are like us. That's our default. It really is, unless we've built a socialization process that's different from that.
I'm glad you said that. Like, I'm really glad you said that because it's true. Like, we all do have biases. We all are human. You're black, you're white, you're tall, you're short, you're straight, you're lesbian, you're gay, and we throw people into categories.
Yeah.
And I really liked how you also asked me, I'm sure you've kind of had that before because we've all had that before. And if you actually get to know people, you realize everyone's had hardship in their life, and it may be different, but it all hits, here, more of so the same. Yes. And so I think that's such a powerful message. Now, a lot of people also kind of have this same perspective about the private sector and about business and about working for the suits, right? The corporations. What is your message as a leader to people, in your organization who may not feel like they can express themselves in a corporate setting or in a business setting? And also, how has COVID maybe changed this now we're all, I'm interviewing you in your own home right now, it's a lot more personal. What have you seen and what's your message to those people?
Well, first, as we said, is we all want to be able to express ourselves in a way that feels comfortable to us and who we are. We all do. Matter of fact, we relaunched a equality and inclusion strategy in the fall. And we did research. As a matter of fact, pre-COVID, so last December, January, February, I traveled around the world. I ended up being in 10 different countries. And we asked employees, what do we're going to be evolving our diversity, equality, and inclusion strategy. What is important to you? 7 out of 10 times, first thing that came out was, I want to be able to be myself. That's what I want to be able to do. If they were under 30, it was 10 for 10, Kevin. Like 10 people, 10 always said it. I want to be my authentic self. So there is this desire for authenticity, and it expresses itself in different ways. So then we'd ask, right? Like, what does that mean to you? Like, Kevin, what does it mean to you? And Shelly, what does it mean to you? And what we'd hear is everything like, I want to be able to dress how I want to dress. I want to be able to wear my hair. Now think about that. Think about hair. Think about some cultures and what their hair type is and what their culture is for the hair, and how some of the negative biases are that are against, a range of things. And so authenticity is a really important thing. And it's people are getting more and more aware on, like, I want to be able to do that. I want to be myself. Here's the business reason. When people can be themselves and they don't take energy to like hide and pretend, then all that energy can go to growing a business. So it's a really good thing. It may sound small. You can minimize and say, oh, well, what do you mean, Shelly? You want people to be able to dress the way they want or wear their hair? I'm like, I want people to have some of the freedom to dress how they want, within range. I'm not talking about wearing your shirt. I mean, I'm just, I get you. Yeah. You get it. So there is this desire that people have for authenticity, and it is growing, and it has been growing. I will tell you, if you walk down the P&G halls, I haven't been there in a long time, but whenever we're there again, you will see over time what's happened is a broader and broader range of acceptability for things. When I joined P&G in the 80s, you said it, everybody was wearing suits, everybody was wearing ties. Matter of fact, when I interviewed for P&G, Kevin, they sent me to the wrong location. This career office did. They moved locations on me. I had to run to my interview to make it on time. And I had one of those bow tie things. Like it had two strings, but then you had to put into a little bow. And I ran so quickly to be on time that my little bow thing was like untied. But that was all that women could wear back in the 80s. When you went to interview for a corporation, you had on a suit jacket, looked a lot like the men's, just a little more feminine. And then you had these bow things that you wore. Those days are gone. You're going to see a broader range of how people dress. And I do believe there is a connection between being able to exercise, that authenticity and then contributing. I think it's deeply connected.
Yeah. And just to go on that as well, it's like, like what you said about people feeling like themselves at work and what that does for productivity. It's like, as a business owner, it's like, payroll is most likely, the highest expense on your balance sheet. And so think about it, like if a machine was only operating at 40% capacity, you would replace it. Like you got to focus on the people within your organization. Yeah. So, it's so great to hear this, because as a large organization that touches so many lives, we just love hearing that you guys are taking a stance on this early and really being real leaders in that sense in the space. What do you think this could do ultimately for humanity if more private sector, organizations step up?
I think the first thing is growth, right? If you think about three words I'm going to give you: access, opportunity, and investment. What expansion means is you expand for all human beings. Access to things, opportunity, like access to roles, opportunities for development, investing in them. The whole idea of just finding a way to get a return on investment, right? You said the word, right? A return on investment. Of your employees, the same way you would want of a piece of equipment, except employees are a lot more, important, I started to say, and I would say, yeah, they are important. Yeah. And that's really what it's about. It's finding a way to have all human beings. I was on a panel discussion a few weeks ago, and unfortunately, I don't know who to attribute this to, but somebody in that panel discussion said, I want everyone's children to feel like they can accomplish their dreams. Why would I want to limit that? And I had really resonated with that. And I carry that tape with me. And I was like, I want everybody's kids. And I want everybody. I want you, Kevin, to achieve the goals and the dreams and the vision you have. Because the more you grow, learn, and develop, the more you're going to contribute. You're going to contribute to your community. You're going to contribute to your family. You're going to contribute to the corporation or the organization that you're a part of and their mission and their purpose. And so I think that's the magic and expansive. What I love about working for a consumer goods company is we are very tapped in to the fact that humanity comes in a lot of packages and ways of looking and being and cultures. And it forces us, right, to figure out how to engage and to serve those communities of people. And so it's about growth, Kevin. At the core, it's about growth.
I love it. Now, Shelly, there's been a big movement going on with the debate around shareholder versus stakeholder maximization. Obviously, a corporation, you're maximizing your profits for those shareholders in that interest. But does your leadership team see value in incorporating more of a stakeholder approach? Maybe, like you said, focusing on your employees, focusing on those communities. P&G, such a staple in the Cincinnati community. How is the leadership perceiving the stakeholders within a large corporation like P&G?
So, I mean, for us, it's a both and. We have a responsibility and accountability to our shareholders. And from the moment P&G started in 1837, we also, our original owners, the Proctor and Gamble families, and it was two brothers that started the P&G Corporation. The investment in community and the investment in all of the communities in which we operate is a core part of what we do, who we are, and how we are. We also have extended that over time to look at some of the partners that are with us. Some of those are suppliers, right, that we have a partnership with. Some are other, other organizations. And we believe strongly and deeply in investing. And if you read and you go online and you read some of the P&G stuff, you'll also see that we also make very clear that we believe we have an accountability and a responsibility to invest in and be a part of keeping the healthy, environment and world around us. We invest in the society and the world, that in the communities of which we're a part. So for us, it's a both and. And again, a consumer goods company, we have to be anchored where people are. We have to be anchored where the communities are, and make sure we have our eye on both. They're very connected. They're not. You can't separate them.
Does P&G measure their environmental costs or external costs, such as like the packaging, the chemicals, things like that?
We do. We've declared some objectives and goals. Don't ask me about them because it's the specifics.
Right, yeah.
The expertise area, so I couldn't answer the specifics. But we are very public about, one, our commitment, and two, some of our specific targets. Yeah.
And do you feel like that's also another reason young talent, like you said, the next generation is really pushing us? Do you feel like an environmental interest is also a reason why young people are joining P&G?
Absolutely, for sure. Matter of fact, some of the most frequent questions that we get from our talent that we're recruiting sits in the space of environment, social, and then what I'd call the governance side, or ESG. We are starting to get more questions in that space. The young talent asks us more on the first two. G, or sort of the other side of that, comes from more from investors or other stakeholders, potential investors. But absolutely, it's one of the first questions that we get asked when we're on campus. Is people want to see what we're doing to ensure that the social construct is one that's anchored in growth and respect and inclusion, and that we care very deeply about the environment that's around us.
I just think yeah, absolutely. I just think it's important, accountability. Sometimes we just think of it as, our lefts, our rights, our P&L, and, being accountable for really everything that goes on in the world. If you actually have an interest in humanity, being responsible for kind of what goes out into the world, because the climate does, in my perspective, affect all of us. So I just thought it was really, kind of interesting to have, a guest like you and, a great organization that you guys represent on, and, being real leaders in that sense. So, Shelly, we've kind of covered it all today, and, humanity really being at the core of what we're discussing. So to you, Shelly McNamara, what is your definition of a real leader?
My definition of a real leader is really clear on purpose, right? Purpose. Why does this organization that I'm in, why is this team I'm leading, why do we exist? Is really, really clear on it. Why are you here? I think over time, what real leaders do is the deep work and ask themselves the question of, why am I here? One of the reasons I wrote my book is I had this point of clarity that part of my Shelly's purpose in being here on this earth, which sounds like a big one, but is to open hearts and open minds and build connections that heal the world. That's just sort of became very clear to me in one of my writing things one day. And so I think great leaders get really clear. I'm really clear on the purpose of P&G. And I think I am deeply committed to that purpose, to improve the lives of the world's consumers through the way and in the way that we do it, in a very values-based way. I think you have to be really clear on that and make sure that whatever you're working on and doing, that's aligned with who you are. And then the second piece of that is that you are really clear on how to action that in a way that benefits, humanity and the greater good. So I'm going to leave you with those two things, because I think those have been two of our themes today that have really played out for me.
And I love it, Shelly, and it's really impactful. And just to think that, all the employees within P&G could be focusing on their purpose, what type of change we could really see in the world. So, Shelly, really appreciate you coming on the show. I love the discussion today. Hope your twin daughters get their first drink on their 21st birthday, and keep it real. So for Shelly McNamara, I'm Kevin Owers asking you to go out there, be clear on your purpose, folks, and always keep it real. Thanks, Shelly.
Thanks, Kevin.
All right, good people. Thanks for hanging on to this episode of the Real Leaders Podcast. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. If you have any questions for Shelly, please, by all means, enter them in the chat box below. But Shelly, while we're waiting on a few questions, I just want to ask you, how was that process for you when you established your why, your purpose? What type of methodology did you use? Did you go through a workshop? Maybe explain that to me.
Yeah. For me, I followed my passion, and one of my passion areas was writing. And so anytime that I felt something deeply, I would start to put pen to paper. And so I followed that. I didn't try to stun it. I didn't try to hold it up. I just followed it. And so I had journals. I had stacks of journals that about 4 years ago, I said to myself, I need to start doing something with this. And so that's what I did. I followed that path that said, do this. And then I just kept writing more and more. I kept writing short stories, and I wrote poetry. And then one day a P&G person came to me and said, hey, we want you to give a speech. And I said, okay. And what I did is I used my personal storytelling combined with poetry to give a speech. And I got a standing ovation at that speech. And it was like, oh, there's something here. Like, there's something here. But it required me to follow my path. It required me to follow my instinct that said, you love to write. And when you are triggered emotionally, you get some really cool words that end up on a piece of paper. I had no idea what I would do with those. It took me a long time on Sunday afternoons for a long time. I started going through all these journals and just putting them in my personal computer. So I stacked together over 200 poems and a number of short stories. And I was like, what's the pattern with this? And then I honestly, when I was sitting there, I'm like, I'm going to open hearts and open minds and build connections, and that healed. And I just wrote it down, and that was it. Now, I don't say that happens for everybody in that way, but I think what does happen for all of us, if we pay attention, is we have energy that's driving us somewhere. We have energy that's pulling us somewhere. And I think we owe it to ourselves to follow it and see where it goes. Because I think it will go somewhere if you just keep stepping. I had no idea when I started doing those journals and getting them all that one day I would publish a book. No idea. And not only a book, but one that integrates who I am professionally and who I am personally. And that feels great. And I could never have dreamed of that, which I would give you my last point is I think you can't try to hold on too tight to the outcome, because it's going to unfold, I believe, in a more beautiful way, as long as you just keep sort of going with it. My experience.
Following that purpose. Now, also being able to articulate, and express what makes you unique it's a great trait of leadership, and to express oneself authentically, building that sense of connection with so many different people is very powerful, and is a very, a unique trait that a lot of leaders possess. Now, Shelly, do you have any poems that you could share with us from your book? I'd love to hear them.
I do. I'm going to read one for you. I marked one because I think this one is one that's most relevant for leaders, which is why I picked this out. And it's titled Level Set. We are taught to see things and people as better than and less than. Why not different than? We have this need to level up and down. I win, you lose. You win, I lose. One up, one down, always. Why not level set? Grant you the space to be you, and I get to be me. We no longer need to make one better than, to make one less than. What will it take to level set? To see each other as different, but equally magnificent. Create space where everyone can shine.
Powerful.
And I think that's the job of leadership. It's a one part. It's really, as a parent, it's a similar job. You have multiple children, they bring different gifts. You have to connect with them all from a place of love, but you have to give them different ways to become themselves. And leadership is a lot like that. You have to come from the place, though, that says, I have to build an environment where no matter what, I never make someone feel less than.
Powerful. Powerful. Shell, we had another question just flying here from Madeline. And Madeline asks, how did your conversations change about equality and inclusion during 2020?
Well, they changed a lot, and they didn't change. So I'll tell you what didn't change. What didn't change is P&G has had a deep and lasting commitment to this space for a really, really long time. We spent, as the George Floyd murder happened, as the escalating conversation on race, and frankly, an elevated awareness of racial inequality, we deepened and broadened our work in racial equality. We had been working on that, but we really deepened the conversation. I would say what happened was more people came into the conversation. We're a global company. More of our non-US leaders who were not US citizens didn't understand the full history, even the history of slavery. They didn't understand the history of racial injustice or inequality in a visceral way, the way you at least see it when you're here in the US. We may not all see it the same way, but they have none of that. And so one of the things that we saw were more people jumping in to listen and to learn. And I saw a particular increased investment in that from our non-US leaders who were like, well, I need to learn and know and understand more about this. So that was one of the biggest shifts that we saw. The other one that I would say, and that was all really good. And then the other thing I would say is that there's just an awareness of how do you include people when we're distant, and making sure. And we sent guidance out to all of our leaders, but like, how do you make sure that happens when people are staring at computers all day, and make sure that they're connected? And it built an awareness, a very visceral one, of who do I reach out to? And that is sort of easy. Like, who do I pick up the phone and call all the time? Or who do I am? And then who do I not? And because the exclusion becomes immediate, right? I think in an office, you can kind of not really pay attention or know, well, yeah, I walk by Kevin's office a whole lot more. I really only go by Shelly's every now and then. It feels like Shelly and Kevin have access to me because we're all sort of around here. But when you're distant and you're on technology, there's no hiding of that. And so I think that one is it was important for us to talk about it. And two, it was important for leaders to take action on it, and make sure they intentionally engaged people, all of their people.
I think that's such a good point. I think so many others felt that too during the lockdowns. Like, oh, what am I actually doing on a daily basis? Relearning, rethinking kind of the norm that we all have just been going through on a daily basis without even expecting, anything different. So, going forward now in 2021, does P&G want to, maintain that sense of change of let's rethink things? Because I feel like, COVID really accelerated a lot of that. What to you, Shelly, are you going to be doing different in 2021 to, rethink and be different than what you were doing originally?
There's the personal side, and then there's the organization side, right? And I'll just say for me, in my job, I travel a lot. And so the fact that I have not traveled and not gotten on an airplane in, close to a year, that slowing down has taught me reminded me of the importance of reflection, and just the old phrase of sometimes you go slow to go fast. And when I was on that wheel, right, I lost some things and I missed some things. And so I think today that I want to take forward is I am more thoughtful about saying, I need more space on my calendar. I need space and time to think. I need space and time to just more informally connect with people. And I also am, going to work hard to not overburden, right, that schedule, because I've learned the power and the importance of some of that reflection and pause time, right? I think is very important. On a company level and a corporation, and sort of on the organization level, we're re-looking at how work gets done and how we think about work, right? And we have a project going. A project team's working on a project called Workways, and they're really looking at, how do we think about this? Because we had and we supported flexible work. We had flexible work arrangements. You could agree with your manager. You work at home certain days, and we've realized we can broaden that. And it's the analogous discussion we had that we are working to figure out how do we broaden our humanity, and how do we broaden our ability for people to be, more, show up in their way. It's the same thing with work. How do we think about broadening what's acceptable and how to think about it? I expect more people will work at home more frequently, right? I expect more diversity of that. I also expect more intentional conversation from work teams and work groups to say, what do we need to do to create what are our norms for how we're going to get work done. So there'll be guidelines, still principles, guidelines, some policy, of course, but also I just think we will have more flexibility for teams to decide on how they're going to do things. And I think both of those are really good things, because I have learned that when you provide more options, human beings can, with the right context around them, make better choices. If you just give them more, be clear where the guardrails are, and then give them some guidance, but then leave space for personal choice.
I love it. And I hope, we're able to sustain something like this, and what really change that could make, for humanity and people being able, like you said, to be their authentic self. So Shelly, thanks for bringing it today here on the Real Leaders Podcast. Any last words for people listening to this about where they can find more information about yourself and your book?
Yeah, Kevin, they can go to ShellyMcNamara.com. You can read about my book, see some of my writing, and if it sparks and it triggers you, there's enough there to get you going. So thanks for today, Kevin.
Wonderful. Shelly, appreciate your time here on the Real Leaders Podcast. Folks, if you want to listen to this episode on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, hit that link in that chat box there and you subscribe to the Real Leaders Podcast, as this episode will be released the following Saturday. For Shelly McNamara, I'm Kevin Owers, asking you to go out there and always, folks, keep it real. Thanks, Shelly.